Hello, everybody. Welcome to Laughing Place Movie Club. Tonight we are talking about Ferdinand from Blue Sky Animation Studios, a company that Disney acquired with the 20th Century acquisition. And Ferdinand is one of the newest items on Disney Plus. It just came on January 8th. And we always try and pick something that's very current and new to Disney Plus. Hi, Big Kitty. Thank you for joining us. And anybody who's watching, we are live at the moment. So if you see the comments on the side of your screen, you can join in the conversation about Blue Sky Studios' Ferdinand.
Who's the picture there?
That is a rescue ranger, I believe. No? I thought it was. Now I'm thinking of a fox, like a...
He looks like a fox because he's not... I don't know. We'll find out.
But anyway... Big Kitty's avatar is not Ferdinand, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. And so now this is the second time this story, to my knowledge, has been put to animation. Walt Disney adapted it as a Silly Symphony short, which won an Academy Award. The feature-length version did not. But Benji, which version of Ferdinand is your favorite?
I mean, they're so different. I mean, one's a feature, one's a short. I grew up with the original, and I like the stylization, I think, more. This obviously has, a full movie. But I guess I'm just surprised it was a Silly Symphony. I always thought it was something like more than a Silly Symphony. Because I don't know what it was about it, but what I always thought was interesting about Ferdinand was it definitely has sort of a pacifist message to it. But it came out, I believe, in 1938, the Disney version, obviously.
Let's check that. Yeah, 1938. So
it came out between the wars, right? And we know Walt Disney served in World War I as an ambulance driver. Mm-hmm. And so, would have seen some gnarly things. But then, by the time you get into the the war period, the Second World War, with the Good Neighbor films, like Saludos Amigos, Three Caballeros, and obviously the propaganda films, obviously, things had changed. And I mean, that's not Walt changing it. That was America changing. There was very much an isolationist bend to the politics of the time until the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and, it kind of dragged America into the war despite not wanting to repeat the suffering of the First World War. So it kind of hit Walt Disney right at sort of the right time. I don't know that this movie the Disney short would have been made 2 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to think about the themes. The theme of the children's book, obviously, I think is closer relayed in the themes of the Disney short, which stays pretty true to the book, which was a very popular children's book at the time. So popular, in fact, that the title card and the poster to promote Walt Disney's short version was based on the children's book cover, which was a red cover with the bull and all these little stylized Spanish flowers falling around him, because the story takes place in Spain. The film version, however, has a kind of different take. Expanded into this 90-minute feature, it really takes on more of a message of what it means to be a man, and that it means so many different things. It's less about not wanting to fight and more about just having interests that go against the grain, and the message being that that's okay. So it certainly is a different take, certainly a more updated take for a modern audience on the story.
Do you think of Roger Rabbit cartoon spin when you see this movie?
Because of the bull in a china shop? Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's like they had to do the gag of the bull being in the china shop, but when I think of that joke, that I don't think everyone picks up when they do Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin, because you're going through so fast and twirling around.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar, in the Roger Rabbit cartoon spin Disneyland attraction, there's a scene where you go through a downtown district, and one of the stores has a bull, and they're in a china shop, and the name of the store is the Bullina China Shop, like Bullina. Very funny. Stylistically, Blue Sky's adaptation of Ferdinand. I like what they did with the character designs, but I also feel like this belongs in the expanded universe of Home on the Range. For some reason, the way they've stylized goats and cows to me fits right in. And obviously, one was hand drawn and one is computer animated. But do you think there's any coincidence in that Disney feature animations, one of their worst animated films of all time, has a similar look and style to one of Blue Sky Animation Studios' best?
I think it just comes from what I think of as sort of cartoon farms. Like to me, it has a very Saturday morning style. Obviously, 3D, but it's definitely got that sort of over amped up physiques and sort of angular faces for many of the characters. Ferdinand's softer, but it's definitely got that same vibe. And to me, that just comes across as farm, cartoon farm. Like, I don't think they reinvented the wheel. I think, I think this movie is well executed. Like, I feel like the scenes individually are very well set. There's a lot of great gags. There's a lot of great direction. But I feel like it is very much taking from other sources. And I don't want to say, specifically any source, but I don't think it was trying to do anything new. Mm-hmm. I think they just executed on sort of a tried and true formula, which Blue Sky, they seem to do better when they're given sort of a 6-foot head start with something like Horton Hears a Who, where you have the, obviously the Dr. Seuss styling that you can rely on. You have the Peanuts movie, which obviously has a very specific style. So, I think in many ways they were adapting not necessarily a specific story, but sort of generic cartoons, and therefore, the movie goes longer. I mean, it's not a straight line like the short is. Obviously, there's more to foot, so it's more pushed out. I just feel things like style, and those, I guess, those intangibles are kind of lacking that they in their adaptations are able to pull and kind of boister themselves up.
Now, is there anything? I definitely agree with that. Is there anything about the way the film was executed as recently as I think just 2 years ago that you find a little surprising in the current landscape of the way Hollywood makes these kinds of movies that are set in a specific time and place?
Well, there's definitely the Spanish cast. This doesn't take place. This takes place in Spain, and then you have sort of the American cast, and Spain being part of Europe, it's not quite like a movie set in Mexico where there's a distinct cultural separation from mainland Europe, and so it's a little trickier to me. In the same way, I'm curious to see with Luca. Where that takes place in Italy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the same, it's still, how will they bring that cast out is as opposed to something that takes place like Raya, where you're going to get an Asian American cast because it takes place, in that part of the world. The sort of generic European thing is a little bit less specific. So I'm curious to see how they play it out. But I like the voice cast. John Cena, I thought, like, okay, here's just ultimate stunt casting, right? Like, but I think he did a great job as Ferdinand. I mean, he's known as being a wrestler, so he's able to have that big voice, but he's able to be Ferdinand, and who essentially is a big softie, which you don't think of when you think of WWE, or maybe you don't. I don't watch it, but
yeah, and I would agree with that. I think it was interesting that Ferdinand kind of came on the heels of Coco. I think it came out within like 6 months. Also, not too long after Moana, and you had both of those films going so far with not only having a story culture trust from within the culture, but also making sure the voice actors were of that heritage. So I remember raising an eyebrow at Ferdinand before it even came out, and then sitting in the theater. And the thing that really jumps out to me, because I agree, John Cena does a great performance. Most of the voice cast does. The bull, who's like Scottish, I've always thought was weird. Story set in Spain, like they don't give you a backstory of like he was imported from Scotland or the UK. But all of a sudden there's Angus the bull, which I think is just a joke to have a bull named Angus in the story. But the one, and I'm a huge fan of hers, and I think she does great in the role. Kate McKinnon, but Kate McKinnon plays a goat named Lupe, and I'm surprised they didn't get more flack for that. That they have a character with such a like distinguished Spanish or Latinx name, and then
but I don't know, because it's not. I mean, I think you need to be careful of combining Mexico and Latin America with Spain. Those are two distinct cultures, obviously.
I get that, but I'm just saying the name Lupe is not a name that you typically see on a non-Latina woman.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure you are in Spain.
In Spain, Lupe is a big name.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I got to Latin America from. So, I think I'm by no means a culture expert, but this isn't Coco, which is really embracing the Latin American Day of the Dead celebration. This still comes from the sort of Spain, which obviously has a very mixed heritage. If you go to Spain, there's parts of Spain that don't consider themselves Spaniards because they're like Barcelona when you go to Barcelona. So there's great diversity that it's a hard path to go down because there's parts of Spain that are anti-bullfighting because of its association with Spain, which they do not consider themselves part of.
So, and that's another part of the story. I thought it was interesting that they tackled Ferdinand at a time when, Spain was facing a lot of pressure from outside sources to end bullfighting. And I think they did like a year before Ferdinand came out. Didn't they end it?
It's still legal. There's parts of Spain where it's not legal. It's kind of like I'd say gambling in the United States. There's parts of it where it's legal and fines, parts where it's banned, and there's parts where it's not illegal, not banned, but just not prevalent. It's definitely declined in popularity over the centuries due to many factors, including its obviously its animal cruelty position, but also once again its association with nationalism, which is a very complicated conversation in Spain. And so I'm not going to go into it, but when you go to Spain, and especially if you go to Barcelona, you will realize it's not as simple as us silly Americans think it to be.
Well, I have never been there, so silly American over here, just making broad general assumptions about the place. But having not been there, I will say I do like the art style that the team went with to represent Spain. That feels generic Spain to me. And I'm assuming they did research trips the way Disney and Pixar typically do to kind of capture that feel and that aesthetic, which I think is cool. Now, the director of this, I don't think he directed Peanuts or Horton Hears a Who, but he did direct all the Ice Age films, Carlos Saldana, and he's also done a lot of the Blue Sky films, even Robots, the Rio films. So kind of the Ice Age franchise, their Hallmark original franchise, and Rio, their other big hit before tackling Ferdinand. Of the films in that category, where would you rank Ferdinand ranked against Ice Age, Robots, and the Rio movies?
I've not seen Robots. I think I've only seen the first Rio. No, I've seen both Rios. I like the first Rio. I mean, it's Newt. But I liked it a lot more in recent viewing than I remember liking it in the theaters. I don't know if it grew on me or, I just went in with a little bit of a more reasonable expectation for Blue Sky. But yeah, I would say it's maybe, top third.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd probably say the first Rio would be my top favorite of the films directed by Carlos Saldana. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And then I would definitely say Ferdinand number 2. Robots I would place number 3. And I saw it in theaters. I don't think I've seen it since. I took my my younger sibling, but the thing that really stands out to me is Robin Williams. It's like his other animated film beyond Aladdin and Aladdin 3. So, and he kind of plays a robot that in my mind is very much like Ben from Treasure Planet, although I think Robots came out a little bit before Treasure Planet. Were there any other thoughts or impressions you had of Ferdinand, Ben, that you wanted to talk
about? This came out. Did this come out after the acquisition or while it was in process?
This came out this came out in 2017. We knew that Disney was planning to buy 20th Century Fox, the film studio. It was looking already like there wasn't going to be any major hurdles in stopping that. And so this was one of the first Fox releases that I reviewed for Laughing Place, just because at the time we thought, well, we might as well jump on board because it'll become Disney someday. I don't think there was any, at that point, I think it was pretty much a given that the merger was going to happen.
We've talked a lot about Blue Sky over, as these movies have kind of joined Disney Plus with Peanuts and
Horton.
And, as every day goes by, I still get more curious about what the future is for Blue Sky at Disney. And, they're not, there's value there. I think they do, as we said, talk about the adaptations they've done, which Ferdinand is an adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And Spies in Disguise was fine. But, it's also not Disney Animation or Pixar level as a whole. And so I'm just curious as to see what comes from this. With Disney Plus, there's a thirst for content. So I wonder if they'll keep making movies, but maybe these animated movies go straight to Disney Plus, in order to kind of not muddy the waters of sort of, Disney's mainline animation franchises.
Yeah, and my hope is that some of the animated productions that were announced at the Disney Investor Day, where they didn't specifically call them out as being from Disney Animation or Pixar Animation, my hope is that those would be done by Blue Sky. In particular, I think they would do really well with the Night at the Museum animated movie that was announced.
I think Diary of a Wimpy Kid too. I mean, because
Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the animated version, like that's the studio I would want that to be at. So I think they would do really well with those kinds of things.
Yeah, what's interesting is they didn't mention them, and it's like, so who else was? I mean, someone's got to animate it.
And I wonder if they didn't mention them just because maybe the brand recognition isn't that strong. Because I would say Disney Animation, Pixar Animation, you see those logos, you know what you're in for. I would say Illumination is the next one, the company that does all the Despicable Me's and the Secret Life of Pets they're part of Universal now. But I would probably say Blue Sky is number 4 on that list, and then like everything else is pretty much independent, right? Like I can't think of another big animation studio.
Blue Sky, Illumination, DreamWorks.
Like you then get these one-offs that often go straight to streaming. Like we just had Over the Moon, which was Glen Keane Productions and Pearl Studios out of Shanghai. We had Klaus, a Netflix film, which I think was an independent production that got financed by Netflix. But everything else I can think of has been, independently animated.
What's interesting is Blue Sky Studios, their Twitter's still active, but it's mostly saying, hey, we're going to, this is on Disney Plus, watch now, and a couple of animation recruitment things. But they didn't make any mention of the Investor Day, which is just weird to me. On the Investor Day, they just shared
that is interesting. Yeah, because every other studio was retweeting like from the main Disney account, like even National Geographic, when they announced their next season of Genius, like Nat Geo retweeted it and was like, "We're making this for Disney Plus," So yeah,
So I mean, obviously they're still recruiting, so they're making something. But it also wouldn't be the first time where they're recruiting, doing the normal thing, and then something happens. Because when they do these recruiting efforts, they it's usually Disney Animation, Pixar, Disney Television Animation, Lucasfilm Animation, and Blue Sky. And so I'm curious to see, how that all shakes out.
Yeah, it would be a shame because I mean, there's such an interesting history anyway with Fox and animation and trying to set up their own animation studio. Starting in the '90s, you had them partnering with Don Bluth to make things like Thumbelina, Anastasia, and Titan AE. And then after that, hitting it big with Ice Age with Blue Sky. And then that has been their like animation studio ever since,
Well,
It'd
and
be
it's interesting that I would say what happened, it's interesting to follow, right? Emblemation, made American Tail.
Amblin animation.
What's that?
You mean Amblin animation?
Didn't call it Emblemation?
Yes, you did.
No, isn't that what they called it?
I knew it as Amblin animation. 2 words.
Anyway, I will Google this. But and then obviously Disney kind of made their thing, and so all these people were trying to copy that, right? Like, well, Prince of Egypt, We're Back, a Dinosaur Story, Balto, Rockadoodle, what's that one with the dog? Rover Dangerfield. And then like they all kind of failed, right? Like they just didn't really go anywhere. And they all kind of cut
time. They had like 20 adventures.
Well, yeah, but that was after the fact. It wasn't a success in its initial thing. Oh, and really? It was and then after Pixar, right? Then suddenly all these CG studios come out of the woodwork, right? PDI, which ended up getting bought by DreamWorks, Blue Sky. Everyone created animation studios, but this time, because there was such a bigger appetite, they were able to be more successful. And I think they're also better made. But and now with streaming, with Netflix, you're seeing all sorts of little mom and pop animation studios pop up because of various qualities. Some great. Klaus obviously was well received, and then some sort of not so great. But there's so much out there now. There's more animation now than probably ever in history. At least in terms of feature animation.
Mm-hmm. I think the Oscars having a full category devoted to it, which ranks between 3 and 5 nominees every year,
which Ferdinand was nominated for, right? Yeah. It'd be interesting to see this year with the weird, how that plans out, because obviously they're streaming movies, and I think this year they're making an exception where if it was designed for theatrical but ended up going to streaming because of COVID, it's eligible. So it'd be interesting to see. Disney and Pixar typically win that Oscar.
Well, and Disney didn't have one for 2020, but Pixar had 2.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see.
It would come down to Onward, Soul, and Over the Moon as probably like the 3 likely nominees for Best Animated Feature.
Yeah. Well, you've seen Over the Moon, right?
I did. Yeah.
What would you pick from what you've seen? What's your?
I would lean towards Onward, I think, as being the film. Over the Moon has some similar themes. It deals with coming to terms with the loss of a parent, but I think the way Onward deals with it is so special. Over the Moon is certainly very, very imaginative. Onward kind of fits within the box of like your typical, what your typical like Dungeons and Dragons player might invent for a world that's based on their game, and certainly parodies Dungeons and Dragons with the what was it, the gelatinous cube bit. But I would say it would probably come down to Onward and Over the Moon personally. Soul would be another easy contender, though. I don't think Soul would be an upset for it. I just feel like personally I preferred Onward to Soul in terms of film to film, but both would be great. And Over the Moon would not shock me if that won. And
There's some breaking news. That's why I'm distracted.
Disney or otherwise?
Disney. Disneyland is going to become Southern California or Orange County's first major vaccine distribution point.
In the park?
They did not provide specifics.
I want to get my COVID vaccine up the street in the shadows of Sleeping Beauty Castle.
They might want you to be living in that county. I do not think they want to bring people to Orange County to get vaccinated.
Move real quick. Can I get a UPS mailbox address? Will that count as proof of residence?
Probably not.
I live there now. That would be cool. I'm really not. I don't normally want to live in Southern California, but that would be cool. I don't like.
Alex does not handle things like that well.
That traffic is insania. Also, I'm not really like LA vibe kind of person.
Nope. No. So I guess with that, since we got interrupted, next week we've got a Hulu film, which you got what that is?
Is that Derek Delgadlio's in?
No, it's the Ultimate Playlist of Noise.
Oh, I haven't seen
Hulu. Your review will be up on Wednesday. So,
better
but
get
we'll
to that tomorrow.
Come check us out on Friday. Watch the movie starting Friday, and we'll be back here Monday to discuss it. So, any last words, Alex?
No, thank you for everyone who stuck with us. And, if you haven't seen it yet, Ferdinand is now streaming on Disney Plus. And also coming up on Friday, we've got WandaVision, which everyone's been waiting for eagerly.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.